So thanks everyone for joining me today. I'm conducting tech talks for a while now in Holy Code, and I wanted this one to be a bit different. What you're going to hear is mostly based on personal experience, so it's a very personal talk regarding a topic that is very near and dear to me. So there's no, let's say, books I can refer you to or blog posts and stuff like that. These are just some things that I've observed over the years. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Miroslav. I work as an engineer here in one of the Holy Code teams for the Neon team. And I'm a huge fan of various hobby games. I discovered the hobby back in the mid-90s, 94 or 95. I started with AD&D and then proceeded on to Warhammer, Magic the Gathering, and I've played really a load of stuff over the years. These days, I'm exploring some other systems, mostly from Free League Publishing, and I'm painting my 6th Warhammer army. So basically, these are the things that I'm doing right now. And this talk today, when I actually became a tech lead about 7 or 8 years ago, after a while, I started noticing certain patterns, certain things that can be actually translated from my experience in running D&D games to actually experience running teams. And this is what I would like to talk about. But first off, let's briefly cover what are RPG games, because D&D is one of probably the most famous RPG game that exists. So basically, those are the games that fall in the category of tabletop games, meaning you and your friends sit around the table and do something, like card games and board games and miniature games and whatnot. But with RPGs, it's a bit different because first you have one player, let's call him the storyteller, who actually creates the story for other players to participate in. So it's kind of a collective storytelling. The storyteller describes you the scene, like you're standing in front of the ruined castle, it's early morning, you're in the valley surrounded by fog and the forest, you can hear the flock of crows somewhere nearby. So what are you doing? And then you, the players, are actually telling the storyteller what are you going to do. You're describing your actions, and he's describing how your action, the effects of your actions, what's going further. And basically, you go through the story. So there's no clear winner. The idea is to collectively create a story about your characters and what they are doing. And many players have been playing this for years. So obviously, only your imagination is the only limit there. You can make the games as short as you like or as long as you like. And over the years, people created the whole episodes and sagas about multiple characters and their children and successors and whatnot. So RPG games are also, let's briefly expand on this. In most RPG games, you have some idea of progression, meaning your character will somehow attain further knowledge and skills as he progresses through the story. In some cases, he will basically earn experience, so he can spend that experience and use it in some other way to actually make himself a bit better. RPG games are usually divided into systems, and basically systems are sets of rules which allow you to run a certain type of game. So some systems might be suitable for games which are set in fantasy setting, or maybe cyberpunk setting, or science fiction setting, or maybe modern setting, or some historical setting. So depending on what kind of game would you like to play, there are many systems that support a different play style, with different types of characters, different types of stories that you can tell. There are also some generic systems, meaning that they can be used for any type of story that you would like to try. And of course, there are many companies publishing those games. However, Dungeons & Dragons was the first one and is by far the most popular one. So it was created in 1974 by two guys, Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, and they were primarily war gamers who wanted to shift focus from the armies that they were building for their games to actually characters who were part of these armies, some heroes, basically. So what are these heroes doing when they are not fighting? And slowly they started evolving this rule set. There was a set of rules called chainmail, and then from the chainmail spun what became like a prototype of the Dungeons and Dragons. At first, it was basically just a pamphlet, and war gamers from their area used it to play their games. But slowly, more and more people started becoming interested in this, and it came to the point where they actually created one of the biggest conventions in gaming there is. It's called GenCon. So from there onwards, I mean, almost 50 years later, we are coming to a world basically where estimated number of players is basically 50 million, and this is from January 2024. Dungeons and Dragons is not a game anymore; it's a franchise which encompasses several systems, board games, miniature games, video games, toys, and whatnot. There has been recently a big budget Hollywood movie, and many people have discovered Dungeons and Dragons over the course of the past few decades. So back when I started, if you mentioned that you played an RPG game, so people either thought that you're in some kind of cult or summoning the devil or something. So basically that was the atmosphere back in the day. Or they would simply beat you up. Like, I don't know what this person is saying, so maybe it's better to just beat him up just in case. So maybe he comes back to normal, stuff like that. So the world has changed quite a bit since then, from a very niche hobby, very underground hobby, to something which became much more widespread. And what does it have to do with your team? Well, most of the time, I ended up being the storyteller for the games that I ran, simply because none of my friends wanted to actually run the game. So it usually fell down to me because I had most of the books. And at that point, my knowledge of English was better than that of my friends. So I was usually tasked with this task of, hey, you create a story and you run it. And it stayed like that for many years. Today, actually, these days I'm playing the game with my son and his cousin, so it's very different when you play with a 6-year-old and several 9-year-olds. So it's a very different type of game of kids running around in the dungeon, but we'll come later to that. So I started noticing at some point throughout my career that over the course of my playing experience, there were some situations that could be translated to actually what goes on within a team. And I've been leading teams for the past 8 years. It was, I had a bit of a rough start. And then as the years went by, I became a little bit better, but it's always like one step forward, 2 steps back, because you always have to deal with different types of things. However, I would say that some of the situations that I've had to deal with when I was running D&D games kind of prepared me for some situations that I ended up with when I became a manager. So let's just a moment. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to cover several areas where I've seen this overlap between the game and managing the team. So the first and probably the most important thing is everyone must have fun. When you're playing an RPG game, not only D&D, but any RPG game, the idea is that everyone around the table must have fun. Even people who just, pass by the table and stop for a few minutes, ideally, even they will be interested in what they're hearing, and they will stay with you and actually listen to what is going on. What does this actually mean? It's not about you, the storyteller. You're actually creating an experience for other people. So you are responsible in a huge way for what other people are going to experience. On the other hand, it's not like the whole of responsibility falls only to you. It falls only to other players as well, because they need to collaborate with you to actually enhance this experience. So in order to do that, you need to try to figure out what is it that people want from the game. Because if you figure out what people want from the game and what you want from the game, you are actually bringing all these expectations to the table, and you're trying to build something around these expectations. Same thing happens with running the team. You as a manager want something, but also your colleagues, your team members, they also want something. Now, every person has different aspirations. Every person has different ideas. Every person imagines things in a different way. So you need to actually pay attention to what people are telling you and to what you're trying to achieve, and try to find some middle ground so everyone can have fun, so everyone can actually work together. In a D&D game, this would, for example, mean that some players like to explore, some players like to fight. Some players are there maybe only for the story. However, you simply cannot have every single game be a huge fight, or you simply cannot have every single game be about a story or about exploration or character development. So you have to find a mix of things. So at one point, you're going to create a game that is maybe focused on fight. So your fight-centric players are going to be like, yes, finally, some heads are going to roll. On the other hand, maybe 2 sessions later, you'll have a game which is focused mostly on storytelling or exploration, and then other players can actually shine. Same thing goes with your teams. There are certain types of tasks that will be present most of the time, but you need to be aware as a manager that there are other people within your team that actually like doing some other things as well. So you should keep that somewhere in the back of your mind. So when the opportunity presents itself for maybe giving someone jurisdiction over a new project, or letting someone write some documentation, or making the prototype submit, you should know which person in your team would actually be the best for that. And this actually leads us to the second point, which is know your players. Because in order for everyone to have fun, you need to know what your people want, what your players want, what your team members want, and you need to know what they're good at. You know, RPG games, depending on what's your experience, basically, you have seen there are player characters which fall into different types, like warrior, priest, wizard, stuff like that. Some other systems, they don't use classes. They are so-called classless systems, so they might use some other way of actually creating the character. But whatever the case, you usually end up with a character which is specialized in something. Some characters are more specialized in combat, some are more specialized in certain skills, some are more specialized maybe in magic or stuff like that. Same thing is true for your colleagues. People are specialized in different areas. People have expertise in different areas because of their experience, because of what they're naturally attracted to. So in order to successfully manage the team, you should know the strengths of the people you work with. Because, for example, if you know that your players like certain type of story, you can then introduce threads of these stories over the course of the campaign. If you know that some of your players maybe like certain types of movies or certain types of novels, you can actually work with that and introduce those elements later. Same thing actually is true for your team. If you have people who are maybe very good at, for example, who are very knowledgeable about cloud, but right now you're maybe not able to go to cloud or something, when the opportunity presents itself, and maybe when you get a new project that's going to be set up on AWS, exactly that type of person might be the best to do the job. If you have people who are actually very good at architecture or designing new things, and maybe like to leave some paper trail behind it, when you need to design new things, you should be mindful of those people and actually let them lead in that particular area. This way, you're actually giving the work into the hands of a certain person that actually appreciates doing that. So that person also feels appreciated in it, and he or she feels like his or her skills are valued from your manager. Same goes here. If your session revolves only around certain types of things, other players are going to be like, okay, it seems that I can do nothing here. I built this character that does this and this, but I never have a chance to shine. Basically, it's the same thing. You can hear this when people, for example, are leaving the company. They'll be like, I never got the chance, for example, to shine here. My skills I was never able to show my skills because the type of the work that I was given was completely in contrast to what I know and what I actually want to do here. And you have people who simply became dissatisfied over time and ultimately left. Well, same thing can happen in your RPG game because expectations were not fulfilled and people came with one idea and then simply realized that I spent some time and effort and I'm showing up, but it simply doesn't seem that I'm interested in this. And this is my spare time and I really value this. And ultimately they leave. Now, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So point number 3 is asking feedback and providing context. This is extremely important to have a successful RPG game. However, it is also important for your team as well. For example, after every session, I usually have a ritual where I sit down with my players for like 15 to 20 minutes and discuss what they liked about this particular session and what they didn't like, what are their expectations going forward. And I write down their answers. And I try to incorporate them in some of the future sessions that we are going to play. Sometimes the feedback is pretty straightforward. Everybody's like, yeah, it was great. Sometimes some player will like, well, this might be a bit too long, or maybe this felt like it was pretty forced, that we really had no way of actually interacting with this part of story how we wanted. It's like it has been forced on us. Also, when we want to start something new, for example, when we're planning a new campaign, we sit down and talk. And I try to provide them context about what is this campaign, where it is going to happen, how are we going to play it, which books will be used for creating the characters, so which basically rule sets are allowed, what types of characters I imagined when I thought about the story and stuff like that. Usually players call that session 0, but there could be multiple sessions. Basically, those are preparation sessions before you actually start running the game. Same thing is true when you're, for example, starting a new project. If your manager simply marches into the office and be like, here's the new project, and that's it. You're assigned to it, and now work. Sink or swim. It's really not a good way to handle things. So if you're doing something, if you want your people to participate in it, you need to provide them context regarding what's going to happen. So we need to start working on this new project. It's a new priority. Okay, why? People are asking. Why is this suddenly a priority? And it wasn't a priority maybe a month ago. You need to provide them those answers. You need to provide people context. Why are they doing something so they can be prepared? If you're starting a new project from scratch, you need to tell them the expectations, the deadlines, if they exist, which technologies are going to be used, what is the outcome, why is this project maybe important for the business overall? Is it part of some strategy or initiative that has been started by the management? So it is basically the same thing. The project, in the case of RPG game, is the game you're going to play together. So people have expectations. The project in terms of work is the project that you're going to work and collaborate on together. Same goes for feedback. If you see that your colleagues are maybe doing something great, encourage them. Tell them that they're good at this. Tell them that they need to do more of this. In the same time, if you see some behaviors which are not okay, or if you see them maybe missing their missing the beat, basically, and maybe missing opportunity to do something, let them know. Sit and talk to them. However, you need to be open from the feedback from their side as well, because the feedback is a two-way street. So if they come to you and say how they feel and basically how they feel about the project or the whole thing, listen to them. Talk to them, take the feedback very seriously, and try to integrate pieces of their feedback. Because if they see that you are actually using this feedback and you're incorporating it into everyday work, they will be more than happy because they realize that you actually took their feedback to heart and you're doing something with that. And that brings us to our next topic: respect the rules of the table. So this might be kind of a controversial topic, and a lot of buzz in the hobby world is created purely on this. There's a podcast, for example, called Hobby Nightmares, where people talk about all the bad stuff that happened during their games, be it Warhammer or RPG or whatever. But I think probably the two worst categories are Warhammer players and D&D players. The most horror stories of toxic players and toxic behavior I've heard actually from those two categories. So what is implied by this? Well, there's a saying, your table, your rules, if you're playing RPG games, meaning you and your group have certain rules that sometimes they are explicit, sometimes they're implicit. But obviously, if you decide we're going to play this game and we're going to meet, I don't know, every second week or whatever, one of the first rules is like, don't be late. Don't be an asshole toward other players. Don't try to steal the show and be a spotlight hog, because this is a collaborative game, so it cannot revolve around the same person over and over again. Sometimes people would like to bring their spouses, their friends, girlfriends, children to your games. You should discuss if this is okay or not. Sometimes some player would, on purpose, instigate some problems because they simply like to push buttons and they want to see where this is going to go. And some people are simply insufferable, and you realize that you cannot play with them anymore. In all of these cases, you need to have an honest conversations. And in some cases, you will have to ask certain players to either stop doing something or to completely leave your group. And it's hard, basically, telling someone, I don't want to play with you anymore. Basically, it means it's not an easy thing to do, to tell someone, listen, I really don't like what you're doing, and I don't want to spend time with you anymore. I'm okay hanging with you regarding in some other areas, but here, when it comes to us having a game, I really don't think what you're doing is okay, and I want you gone. And things like that happen from time to time, because the thing is, this is a very intimate experience. Because if you have a group that has been playing for years, they know each other very well, they're very invested in the game, and it takes only one bad apple to spoil everything else. So at some point, maybe a new player can be introduced that can mess up all the things, or some of the players might actually grow some kind of resentment over the years and simply become bitter or jaded, and then you have to deal with them as well. Sometimes it's as simple as telling the person, hey, what was that? I didn't recognize you. Basically, you acted out in a completely surprising way. Let's talk about this a bit. And sometimes these people are like, yeah, I was really having maybe a bad day or something, because things like that happen. People have problems in real life and they will bring them to the gaming table. It happens all the time. Illness, family issues, work issues, injuries, whatever. I've seen it happen basically all the time. Sometimes it's even okay to stop the game completely and just talk to people and maybe reassure them that everything's fine and stuff like that. But in some cases, you'll see people who are simply there to either steal the show because they don't get it that this is like a collaborative effort. And on the other hand, they also simply want all the attention that they can get. And of course, they are the most toxic types, the one that simply want to do bad things because they feel like that. Unfortunately, you'll see the same thing in your team. So the same way you want to protect your free time when you're with your friends and you're engaging into a collaborative act, basically collaborative storytelling. Because first thing, the way this is different from work is obviously you do this in your spare time. You're not compensated for it. The only compensation that you ever get from an RPG game are great memories. Basically, you will have memories of a good time that you had with your friends for years to come. And that's the only thing you get with hobby. It doesn't matter how much money you invest. Money is completely irrelevant to hobby. Regardless of the hobby you choose, money is completely irrelevant. The only thing that is important is the kick that you get out of that hobby. So some people will tell you, why have you spent so much money on that? Books or whatever, you could buy this or you could buy that. But it doesn't, for any hobbyist, be it Warhammer player, a guitarist, record collector, whatever, money is irrelevant, because the only thing that is important is a sense of accomplishment. For work, it's a bit different, because obviously There are deadlines, there are expectations, there's management, and there's your salary and stuff like that. There's a danger of losing your job. So you have to be even more careful there. So if you notice behaviors in your team which are against the rules of the table, especially if you as a team lead have defined the rules that your team needs to follow and you agreed and everybody's respecting those rules, then you need to sometimes remind people that those rules have to be respected. And there has to be a very, very good reason for these rules not to be respected. And unfortunately, and I had to deal with fairly early in my career, sometimes you'll have to ask people to leave. And that is extremely hard to do. And some managers will never never end up in a situation to do something like that. In some other cases, people are not so lucky and they simply have to do this. But the thing is, you need to realize if that happens, that it's actually for the greater good. Because if there's one person who actually jeopardizes the whole team, then that's the decision you have to make. If you don't make that decision, ultimately the team will start expecting you to do something about it. And if you don't do anything about it, that's when resentment sets in. And actually the team might fall apart at that point because you won't be able to protect them from this one bad actor that creates all the issues. The same way I've seen many games die because certain players were involved who were always causing problems, but it was very hard for other people to tell them to actually, not to make them leave, but to just tell them, please stop doing that. They felt like they're going to hurt their feelings. So simply that situation was never resolved, and in the end, the gaming group fell apart. And the last thing, learn when to say no. This is maybe the hardest thing of, this is actually a very hard thing to master. It's something that I still cannot say that even after 8 years as a manager that I've absolutely mastered. And it's also important, especially important in the terms of RPG games. I've heard stories about a lot of dungeon masters or storytellers. So, sorry, I'm throwing out this term for the first time, and I know that some of you might not have actually played the game. So the storyteller, the player who creates the story and basically runs the game, is sometimes called a dungeon master. Sometimes he's called a game master or a narrator or referee, depending on which system you're using. There might be a different term to describe this person, but basically it's the same person all the time. And in some cases, these people are very strict and they behave in a certain way. Like, for example, players are saying, I want to do this, or I want to do that. And straight up answer they're going to get is, no, I haven't prepared it. I haven't covered for that, branch in my story. You cannot do that. The thing is, if you do that right off the bat, if the first idea that the players are presenting and which you don't really like is going to be answered with your no, you are actually creating a ton of damage. You are damaging completely the whole setup. Now, let me explain why. Yes, it is true. As a storyteller, you put a lot of effort into something, and if players come up with a clever solution for some of the problems, and you realize, oh my God, I've spent like a month preparing this, and now basically they ended up, and now they basically talked about it for 15 minutes and came up with a solution that completely destroys everything I worked on. Well, tough luck. Things like that happen. You simply need to learn to suck it up and continue with that, or to improvise on the spot. Both of these actions are way better than just telling them, no, you can't do that. But why? We are playing a game where basically there's no limitations, and we should be able to do something. And then if I'm in, the worst answer that you can give them is no, because I say so, or because I haven't prepared, because it completely breaks this immersion, this and basically they're now being completely thrown off the tracks. So the idea is to actually adopt their suggestion and then build on top of it. So if a player comes up with an idea and says, well, can maybe my character do this? The best approach would be to say, yes, and with this end, you will actually throw additional boundary on top of that, or additional, let's say, sorry, my English fails me now. You actually throw in a thing that might put a specific boundary on top of the action. So maybe a player wants to acquire certain power, and that power is not something that actually that you see as a good idea, but you still don't want to discourage your player. So your answer can be, okay, yes, you can acquire that, but you can learn that power only from this person that lives here and here. So now you actually have thrown a wrench into this plan. So you didn't say no, you said yes, but you have introduced a place where people must travel. You will give yourself time to actually prepare for that particular situation. The players now have a new goal that they can work towards to. So basically you are allowing them to do what they want, while in the same time, you're not giving them complete control, but you're preparing for the outcome of their decision. Same thing goes with your colleagues and their ideas. If you turn down every single idea your colleagues have, very soon you'll end up in a situation where people won't bother saying anything to you because they will know you're going to shut down their ideas. Now, there are different reasons why managers shut down other people's ideas. In some cases, their managers simply think they know the best. And they're like, no, I run the show here. You're here to work and not suggest things. On the other hand, some managers are afraid because they might not be that knowledgeable about what people are suggesting. So they want to give themselves time or something like that. The thing is, sometimes we have to, think on your feet. There are, especially in business, there are certain cases where you simply have to say no. Because maybe what your colleague wants to do is simply not applicable to the current project. It's physically not applicable. It's maybe introducing an technology that simply doesn't have any place here, or doing some change which might be cool, but actually doesn't bring out any value. But if somebody offers to do something and presents a good idea, try to incorporate that idea, because people will feel valuable, especially if you show them that their suggestions are respected and they will be able to actually send their input into the project and improve it in such a way. So don't be a tyrant, don't rule with an iron fist and turn every single suggestion down, but simply build on top of that. And if a player maybe wants to actually, not the player, but your team member, maybe your team member wants to build something new, let him build something new. And then just on top of that, add certain expectations. Yeah, let's try to build that, but please write a document about the new service that you want to build, write the proposal, let's vote about this proposal, and let's everybody chip in their thoughts. So we actually groom the solution right from the get-go. So basically, your colleague gave an idea. He's like, I think that we could actually, that maybe, I don't know, a message queue or something like Kafka would be a very good thing to do here. You're like, okay, before you build it, please create like proof of concept and write the one-pager where you describe why do you think this is important. And then let's basically have a conversation on how do we see this going further, who's going to maintain it, how are we going to progress further on this solution. Don't just shut down their idea like, no, we don't need it, especially if it's something that is adjacent to what you already do and something that makes sense in your current context. And with that, basically, I would close this tech talk. So I hope you found this interesting. As I said, this is purely my personal observations throughout the years. So some of these can be even found in the D&D rulebooks. For example, one of the best books I've seen regarding running D&D games, when it comes especially to D&D, was Dungeon Master Guide 2 for 4th edition of the Dungeons & Dragons. I still think that that's the one that had the best suggestions on how to handle players, It included details even regarding how to sit people around the table. Basically, the seating, let's say, the structure of the seating around the table, who should go where? Where do you put problematic players? Where do you put players who can calm someone else? All other books are giving some advice which is either very common sense or that can be found elsewhere, but this book included some advice that you really don't find anywhere else. And the idea is you are responsible for the expectations and for enjoyment of other people. So there are some things you should and you shouldn't do. But in the same way, when you're running your team, you're responsible for the expectations and the enjoyment of other people as well. Because ultimately, you as a manager can make a lot of mistakes. And the more mistakes you do, the people finally leave you. There's this old adage that goes like, people are not leaving jobs, they're leaving bad managers. And in many, many cases, that is actually true. It might not be every single case, but in many cases, this is actually true. Because a bad manager can mess up so badly that people simply don't want this job anymore. He might not insult the players directly, he might be an okay person, but he can be so incapable of doing a good managerial job, he can turn a blind eye to problems, he can be very slow in making decisions, he can fail in so many ways that it can create an unbearable work atmosphere. And in that case, the only thing that people can is to actually leave. Same thing goes for you being a dungeon master or a storyteller. You can mess up in so many ways, so it is important to know who your players are, what they want, talk to them, and listen to their feedback, and try to incorporate their ideas without telling them no outright. Because in the long run, it will be highly beneficial, and you can create some very, very, some great memories and situations that you will enjoy and remember many, many years after that. So this is basically the end of the talk, so if you have any questions, please let me know now. Okay, in that case, I guess this is it. Okay, bye everyone. Hope you enjoyed this. That's it.